All right, welcome everybody to the Multifamily Investor Nation weekly webinar. I'll be your host today, Brandon Abbott. Try to get my camera to focus here. I'll wait for some of our attendees to join us. Everybody's filing in right now. Thank you for joining us on this Tuesday morning. Still got a minute left in the morning. So glad you could take a moment out and join us today. I was on a couple weeks ago. We talked about CapEx and how to come up with a CapEx budget. Today, we're going to be talking about the do's and don'ts of CapEx management or renovation management. So I'll give us a few minutes for everybody to join. Be sure to type your questions in the Q&A box. That's where I'll be looking for your questions, and then I can check them off and make sure I cover everybody's questions. And then you can put any comments in the comment or in the chat as well. But your questions, if you would, put those in the question and answer, and that's right down at the bottom of your screen. When you hover over it, you'll see the Q&A. Just click on that. And for those of you that have just been missing your normal host, Dan Handford, he will be back next Thursday, and we'll resume a normal schedule at that time. So I know you'll be looking forward to getting him back and going over some things with him. But I'm glad to fill in for him in the meantime. Just so you know, the replay for this webinar will be published or emailed out later this afternoon or this evening. And then you'll see an update on the webinar page about the next few webinars coming up later on today as well. So we'll go ahead and wait a couple more minutes, and we'll go ahead and get started. While everybody's filing in, I'll go ahead and give you a little bit of background about myself. I know if you've heard me speak before, you know that, but for those of you who are new, I'll just kind of repeat some of this information for those who have heard it. My background is in residential construction. I was a general contractor in the Greenville, South Carolina market pre-2008. So I started that business when I was in my early 20s. Had three businesses under the general contracting. So I had a framing company, a general contracting company, and then a grading company. Did very well on the that side until the housing market crashed in 2008, as everybody remembers, and learned a lot of lessons about cash flow and leverage from that time period. And also, that was my first eye-opening experience into rentals and then eventually into multifamily. At that time, I saw the need for rentals because everybody needs a place to live. And when they cannot get loans for single family houses, they will go to rentals. And so I saw that as a stable investment platform, and eventually moved over that way. After the 2008 crash, I moved out of the residential building scene and became an insurance adjuster for property and casualty. So I inspected, hurricane damage and contractor liability damage claims across the Southeast, all the way Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and almost into Florida. But we didn't go into Florida, but I'm licensed in all three of those states. I still am. I do not do any insurance adjusting, but I keep those licenses because you never know when you're going to need it down the road. So that's a little bit about a background about me. With PassiveInvesting.com, my role is to acquire properties. So I deal with brokers and build relationships there. I also oversee the initial CapEx budget, and then work at a high level with our asset manager to implement those at each one of our properties, and use my construction background to come up with a CapEx budget or renovation budget. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. We really want to go over the do's and don'ts of construction management. And that's list is infinite. And so we definitely won't be able to go over all the do's and don'ts. But I certainly have learned a lot over the years, and especially in multifamily, because it's a different aspect when you come to multifamily, because your economy is a scale. Single family is a one-off. You're hitting one project, one set of cabinets, one set of appliances. And with multifamily, you're buying multiple sets. So we'll get into that and how that benefits the project in a little bit. I do want to leave a little bit of time at the end for questions. I know the last time it was a lot of information. We had a lot of questions. We got to as many as possible. So I'm going to try to leave a little bit more time during this session to kind of answer questions, because I know it's tough for some people if you don't have a background in construction. It's second knowledge to me. I don't even think about it. I do all my own stuff at my own houses. I just built a big garage addition and a pool house and office and different things at my own house, and I did all that myself. And it's just secondhand knowledge. But a lot of people, you may be on the financial side, you don't understand the construction side, and so I'll do my best to help out in those areas. But again, feel free to put your questions in the Q&A box as we go through this, and I'll do my best to get to everyone. So we have a good attendance list tonight. And again, for those that just joined us, this replay will be emailed out later this afternoon or this evening, and Dan will be joining us back on the webinars next week on Thursday. So let's go ahead and get started. So when you are looking at a property, this is before you start buying the property, you are looking at offering memorandums, or OMs. And in that offering memorandum, you're going to see where the broker has put together what you can do as the new buyer to make this property achieve these rents. And they'll always give you the highest possible comp in the market. And they'll give you, all the stuff that you can do. I mean, you can add the backsplash, and you can do the refrigerators and flooring. And look, this is what this property is achieving. And that's what they put in the OM. That's great to look at. It's great as a starting point, but never ever do you want to go off of that when creating your CapEx budget. So the first don't is don't go off the broker pro forma. The seller that is selling the property, they're going to give you kind of what they've spent on their renovations, so far. And they're going to give you a proven business model. I'm going to use quotation marks. So proven business model. So maybe they've renovated 20 units and they've spent $10,000 per unit, and they're achieving a $200 rent increase. With the broker says, but this is the comp that we're showing. You can still get another $150. And so you can increase the renovations by even more because they're not doing what they could do. Okay. That sounds great, again, on paper, but in actuality, there's a lot of things you have to take into consideration. So the first thing is the seller may have spent too much money on their renovations. Maybe they just clicked the easy button and they just had their property manager just go ahead and handle everything. And yeah, as long as it hits the budget and we can achieve the rents, then great. I don't really care if you can get it cheaper or not. But you may be able to come in and achieve the same renovation for a lot less money and achieve the same rent increase. So you may not need to go to the next level, or maybe you can achieve that next level that the broker's proposing and not spend any more money. So that's where you need to start. You need to really fine tune, your budget. So that's the first thing going in. The first don't is just don't go off of the OM or the broker's proposed renovations. Maybe the market also will not sustain further rent bumps or increased renovation. So a lot of times the very top of the market and their rent comps in the OM may not be an actual comp. So be sure you talk with your property manager and get their pro forma. Don't show them what your is, get their pro forma on what they think they can achieve. They think the rent comps are for the market. And just in the comment section, I just had a thing come across saying internet connection unstable. Is anybody having any issues hearing me, or is it becoming pixelated at all? Just put it in the chat if you would. If you can hear me fine, that's great. I can change my Wi-Fi to designate to this computer if I need to. So no issues. Okay. Just give me 1 second. Let me grab this Wi-Fi here and let me make this a priority device. And then you shouldn't have any issues on that. All right, good. Hopefully that'll, I have 4 daughters, and they each have, a phone or an iPad, and then, the TV is a smart TV, and then my wife is working on stuff. So we can have up to 16 devices running at one time. And I have a 400 meg service, and it still gets a little bogged down. So apologize for any any delay. So hopefully you can hear me good now. Just if you have any issues, just chat in the box. So again, so where I left off was maybe the market will not sustain any further rent comps. So let's say the seller, they spent, $10,000 and they're achieving a $200,000 or $200 rent premium for that renovated unit. And the broker's saying you can achieve another 150. And here's the comp that proves that. Again, go to your management company that you're going to use. Do not make that assessment on your own, especially if you don't live in the market. Your manager lives in the market. They know the market, and they are the ones that are going to have to achieve the numbers that you are putting out there. So you want to make sure you're in agreement before you get in there and not sign them up for something that they are going to have a hard time achieving. And then you're going to be upset with them that they can't achieve these numbers that you arbitrarily put into place. So get the true comps on that. So that's the number one. Have an accurate and precise budget and what you can achieve. So that's the starting point. And then don't let design trump ROI. A lot of times you're getting a property and you're like, oh, we could do this, we could paint all the buildings and we can add in a new pool and we can spend $12,000 and it will be beautiful. And you're right, it'll be beautiful, but will it achieve the numbers that you want to achieve? And if it doesn't, then you're wasting money. You're putting money that's not going to return money. And that's why we're all in this. We're investors. We're not just in there to make everybody have a really, really nice place to stay. We want that, but we want to get a return on our money while providing a nice place to stay. So there's a fine line. There's a point at which you reach that line where it's like, okay, I'm now spending money and I'm not getting it back. So design is not number one. You want to start with your budget and have the designer come in after that and meet your budget. So that's a big one. Just because it looks good doesn't mean the tenants will pay for it. And this is another aspect of having your property manager involved in this at this point in time. Property, you're going to get your CapEx budget high level in place. Then once you're going to go over that with the property manager before you buy the property and say, okay, this is what we'd like to do. Appliances, backsplash, whatever. Which ones do you think in that market people will pay for? Once you get that set up, then when you get the property, you can fine tune that. So work with your management company. You need to know which management company you're going to do. And I'm going to get into a little bit of vertical integration later. So for those of you that self-manage, this will apply to you a little bit more. So right now I'm discussing third-party management because that's what we do. Instead of before and after pictures, I always say, don't look at the before and after pictures only. They're great. They look great. I like taking them. I like a big visual person. I like seeing what it looked like and I like seeing what I did. And you can sit back and say, my two hands did that. It's very satisfying. But what you should be looking at is your LOI or your NOI, your NOI. So have a before and after NOI. That's the most important, and have the highest NOI for the least amount of investment. That's what you're going for. And don't forget why you're in this. It's not, so you can be on HGTV and have your own design show and look all fancy, because we all know those budgets are bogus anyways. So make sure that you are focused on ROI when you're coming up with your design plan. So then have your designer, if you're using a designer, pick out fixtures. We typically like to have our designer work with our contractor because the designer doesn't always know how things are put together, and the contractor is not always good on design. So you want them kind of collaborating together, both with the budget in mind, okay? Because that is the number one thing. This is our budget, guys. Get me the best thing you can for this price. You guys work together, and then you keep a supervisor role over top of that. Okay, so number one, don't go off the broker pro forma. Number two, don't let design trump ROI. Number three, don't let your original plan keep you from exceeding. I know that sounds weird, but don't throw good money after bad, and don't make one bad decision, keep you from making a bunch of good decisions. And what I mean by that is you can get into a property, and just because you plan to spend $12K per unit doesn't mean that you will not change once you get started. So you may have done the steps I already said before. You've talked to your management company, you've decided what you could do, but maybe oh, heaven forbid a pandemic hits and you have to change your model. Don't be married to that. Be willing to change your budget. And there's some other aspects about that you want to keep in mind. You may find you can achieve your rents without spending all that money. So you're going to kind of test your renovations as you go. Don't just go carte blanche, say, I'm going to spend $12,000 per unit for 130 units or whatever, how many units you have. And that's what we're going to do. And, that's the plan, and we're going to stick to it. If you start getting into it and you start not being able to achieve the rents, then adjust. Say, okay, what can we cut? And get with your property manager, work with them. What do you think is a non-essential item in this renovation that'll help us cut the budget, so therefore to increase our ROI, because we're not able to achieve the rents that we thought we could for whatever reason. So work with them and come up with that new plan. Or, maybe you're able to achieve, we've come across this where you're able to achieve your pro forma rents without doing anything. And so if that's the case, and it was just lagging and the market, they're willing to pay for the unit the way it is, then why spend $12,000 per unit if you're able to achieve it without that? Now, if you can get even higher than that, if the market will yield higher, okay, then have that discussion. But my point is, don't just spend the money because that's what you plan to. Your goal, again, is the return on investment. And you may, like I said, you may find you cannot achieve your pro forma rent simply by spending the money. I think I mentioned this last time, the reputation of a property is bigger than the lipstick that you put on it in a renovation. What I mean by that is, if it's a Class C property, maybe it has had some deferred maintenance for a while, but you took it over and you're going to make it look like, the best thing ever. I mean, you're just going to you're going to resurface the parking lot. You're going to paint the buildings. I mean, you're just going to make this thing dog park, everything. That's great. But keep in mind that's going to take time for that to stabilize, and make sure that you are underwriting the correct stabilization period for that renovation. Because as great as the property looks, it's going to take a while for that property's reputation to change and for the tenant base to change that are willing to pay the premiums that you want. It will happen, but it takes time. There's a couple different methods. One method is just to de-lease the whole property, renovate, and then release it with the tenant base that you want. You better have a lot of cash on hand if you're going to do something like that. And, that's a little bit riskier. But just keep that in mind. Just because you're going to spend all this money doesn't mean you're going to be able to overcome immediately the reputation of the property. All right. So don't let the original plan keep you from succeeding. Always be on top of the CapEx. Always be understanding what is going on in the market and be willing to adjust. Another thing that I'll point out on that front, I forgot, I lost my train of thought there. But you just want, it's the rate, your stabilization period. So you got to look at your lease renewals, and you want to make sure that you are timing your renovations with lease renewals. So if you have, let's say in September, you have 12 lease renewals coming up. But your construction company can only manage 7 renovations in a month. I'm just throwing out numbers. Then you want to maybe try to renew some of those people during that time frame and not bog down your renovation company. So try to keep a nice even flow. Your contractor will appreciate you if you keep a nice even flow, because they can get a nice schedule going, and they can get their supply chains going, and it's not jumpy. So if you're doing 2 1 month and 12 1 month and 5 the next month, it becomes frustrating for them, and it becomes very hard to schedule. If you can try as best possible, this can't always be the case, but try to get your renewals evened out. So work with your management company. If they see a month that has a big, high renewal rate, in fall or whatever, make sure you're working ahead of time to try to stabilize those. Maybe you can go to a few of the tenants and say, hey, we'll go ahead and renew you. We won't increase your rent right now, and just keep them in the property cash flowing, and you'll get to them on the next time. So you're going to have to take that into consideration on your stabilization period, that there may be some within the 12 months that you're going to have to kick out, and maybe just give them a 6-month when I say kick down the road is what I meant. You have to kick them down the road on renewals, and maybe it's a 6-month renewal, or maybe you'll have to go to 12-month renewal, whatever it takes to even out your renewals in a month so that you have that nice steady flow of turnover. And so you can have a nice even flow of renovations for your contractor. And you definitely want to keep your contractor happy. It's going to make you better and everybody happy. Don't let your confidence in your contractor keep you from maximizing your profits. What I mean by that is if you don't understand construction, you may have a tendency to just go to a contractor and just let him, oh, yeah, you can do this, X, Y, Z. This is my scope. Scope meaning these are the items that I'm going to do. Here's the price. It meets my budget. Good. Go ahead. Maybe you used them before, or maybe they're recommended from your management company, but always get 3 quotes. Always, because you just don't have anything to compare it off of. If you get a quote and let's say it hits your budget, great, wonderful. Maybe they're higher than the market. Maybe you could have gotten that for a lot less. So have something to compare it to. The standard rules kick out the high and the low. That's not just like a dogmatic rule though, because it depends on the company's reputation in the market. Also get referrals on your contractors, talk to other property management companies that have used them, talk to other property owners that have used them, ask for some references from them, and make sure you're not overly confident, and trust but verify. If you're an out-of-state investor and maybe you're kind of do this as a side gig, that can get out of hand quickly, especially if there's change orders or hidden damage, and you just kind of trust them, to run it passively and take care of it. Always keep an eye on that. Always be checking. Always get 3 bids. Always. So what's the benefit then of having a contractor or being vertically integrated? Vertically integrated being that you do everything. You're the owner, the manager, the contractor, everything down the road. There are some tremendous benefits to being vertically integrated. The biggest one, this is something that I will say, and this is a fact, you cannot do it cheaper than you can if you're vertically integrated. And yes, that is a correct statement. You cannot do it cheaper than if you're vertically integrated. So why doesn't everybody vertically integrate? Well, it comes down to time and how much effort you want to put into it. Because once you start going down that road, then you're dealing with employees now, and you're dealing with taxes, payroll, benefits possibly, and all the rest of it. It's still cheaper, but do you want all that extra headache? So it just depends on where you are in your investment cycle and where you want to be. The benefit to vertical integration is that you can get contract prices for products at a greater discount than most contractors can. The reason is because you own all these properties, you make the decision. So you can go to a flooring contractor and say, we have 2,500 units in our portfolio. We're going to renovate all of them. So we're going to purchase, let's say, 1 million square foot of flooring next year. What kind of rate are you going to give me? I guarantee you're going to get a lower rate than, so-and-so contractor service in Charlotte, North Carolina, or Charleston, South Carolina, or Raleigh, North Carolina, because you're buying it in a larger volume. And I've done that myself. I've handed off. We are not vertically integrated. We use a contractor at this time because we didn't want to be tied down at that level. But I keep a very tight grasp on our contractors. And we handed a lot of those contracts that I negotiated to our contractor to use. So it was still beneficial to us. And I mentioned this before. You can also go to Lowe's. You can go through and get all the items that you want to purchase, get the item numbers, create a list of the quantities. Let's say you have an apartment complex with 100 units, and you're going to replace the appliances, the lights, and everything. Whatever you're going to replace, get the item numbers that you want from Lowe's, take it up to their pro desk, say, this is how much I'm going to buy. They'll send it up to their corporate, and you'll get special pricing on that. And we've seen in excess of 30% discounts off retail for those items. We have seen it to the point where Lowe's is beating the manufacturer's direct pricing. So if I go to a light manufacturer that Lowe's sells their product, and we go to light manufacturer and say, I'm going to buy this many lights, how much can you give it to me for? It's more expensive than if you buy it from Lowe's, because Lowe's has a bigger purchasing power than even I do. So do that. It takes a little bit of extra work, but that's the benefit, again, of being vertically integrated. Your contractor is not going to want to do that much work for you and not pass along those benefits to you. They may do the work, but you'll never see the benefit because they want the margin, right? I mean, they're in it to make money too. Your property manager, the same thing. They know the contractors, the flooring contractor, the tile contractor that they normally use, to spend a whole bunch of time finding the best price that only benefits you and costs them a lot more time. They're less likely to do that, even with the best management companies. It's no fault of their own. It's just, again, it's a lot more time for no benefit to them. And so being vertically integrated, any business owner knows that nobody cares about the business more than you do because you have the most skin in the game. And the same thing applies to vertical integration. But again, that's not for everybody. And you can work with your contractors and you can still work on negotiating prices and hand them over to the contractor, but they're going to mark them up even with your discount. But let's say, I'm getting a 30% discount at Lowe's and my contractor has a 20% margin, I'm still saving money by getting those prices. So just make sure you're not just clicking the easy button. Don't just let your management company click the easy button or your contractor. Make sure you get 3 quotes. Your contractor also does not have your ROI in mind. So they're not out there trying to save you the most money. They're out there trying to make money. That's why they're in business. So I know everybody understands that. So just make sure you remember the relationship. You could be best buds with your contractor. They're there to make money, and you should want them to make money, because if they don't, they're going to be unhappy, and their quality of work is going to decrease, and then you're going to be unhappy, and then it's going to be a big mess. So make sure you're not cutting them short as well. Don't let your confidence in your management company, I mentioned that, keep you from being involved, especially for you out-of-state investors. It's real easy to just, they do a great job and they've been doing this for years and I don't know anything about managing, but you own the property and you either have investors or your JV partner. You have the most skin in the game. You care the most. We have weekly meetings with our property managers to keep up with CapEx. You want to manage the manager. We believe in extreme ownership. That means in the end, there's nobody I can blame for faults except for myself. If something went wrong, it was my fault. It is not the fault of my manager. In the end, I made the decision to hire them. I made the decision to either trust them in a certain area or not. So in the end, I cannot pass the blame on anybody else. It's my responsibility. One thing I want to touch on at this moment in time is the relationship of your contractor and your management company. This can be a big problem. So your management company has to keep units leased. Your renovation company is renovating the units. So if your management company is not hitting, let's say they have vacant units, they're not renting them out. They're going to find some reason to excuse why that's not happening. And the easiest person for that to be blamed on is the contractor. And it may be valid and it may not be valid. I'm not here to discuss that. What I'm here to say is it will become a blame game, and you have to be sure that you come up with a very descriptive process for the handoff of units from your contractor to your management company. Because what will happen is the contractor will back, and then the management company won't be able to rent them. And they'll say, well, that's because when we got it back, there was, I had to patch some drywall, or this, that, and the other was wrong. And it's because they're not doing a good job. And then you go back to the contractor and you said, well, the textured ceiling was already like that when we got the unit. We're not completely scraping the ceilings. It's not in the scope of work. So it wasn't part of our renovation scope. And then you go back to, and it just goes back and forth like that. And if you've ever been in construction management or have employees, it is, and I say this respectfully, it is babysitting adults. That is what it is. You have to have your hands on that. And you have to understand perspectives of both sides, and you have to come up with a process that everybody understands and that everybody follows through on. So one of the things that we came up with, and our asset manager, Brian, worked extensively with our management and contractors on this to avoid this, is we would have the scope of work spelled out very descriptively. We know what it is, but we want the management company to understand what it is. The reason for that is if there's something broken in the unit before the renovation company takes it over and it was caused by a prior tenant, that's not part of the renovation scope. That is turn cost. Okay. The difference between turn cost is something that you would have had to spend regardless of whether you're renovating. Renovating is something, everything's in working order, but you're changing it out. You're making it new cabinets, new flooring, new backsplash. And that can get a little bit gray for people. And, the renovation company comes in and said, okay, we're going to paint the wall. Well, there was maybe the tenant in the last unit put a bunch of pictures up and they used double-faced tape and they hang all these pictures up, and that was on the wall. Well, the contractor does not have in a scope of work to scrape down the walls or to, smooth out the walls or anything else. That's fine if they do that, but they're going to have to charge you more for that. So what we did is we came up with a list of a walkthrough. Okay. And we would have the management company and the renovation company walk through the unit before it's handed over to the renovation company. So they went through and anything that was broken, let's say the disposal didn't work. Okay. We want to mark that down. Find that the renovation company replaces that instead of the maintenance guys, but you have to understand that you're going to get charged extra because it's not in the original scope. And that extra amount is going to be assigned to turn cost and not to the CapEx budget. Okay. That makes a big difference. And make sure everybody's on the same page. This water line was already cracked when we got in here. So everybody knows that if there's a water leak, that's why. What we try to do is have maintenance go in ahead of time and fix any broken items that are not scheduled to be replaced before the renovation team comes in, so that it's rent ready in the classic condition. Okay, hope that makes sense to everybody. Rent ready in the classic condition. And then the renovation company comes in, they complete everything on the scope of work that we've decided as a group to do. And then when they're done with that, we have another walkthrough at the end to hand it back over to management. And it's the same thing, but in reverse. We want the management company to be happy with the paint job, make sure there's no, defects in the work, like maybe they cut some trim wrong or it just doesn't look right or whatever. Make sure that the management company is satisfied with what they're being handed, so that if there are issues with rent, they're not coming back saying, well, the reason we couldn't rent that is because they put the wrong floor color in and the tenants just don't want that. That may be true, but get all that handled before it gets back to the management company. That way there are no excuses. Okay. Systems and processes are the number one way to success in any business. The sooner you can get systems and processes set up, and that's just what you do every time. This is the process. And sometimes it takes flying out to the property and drilling it into people's heads. Just, this is the process. This is the process. This is the communication chain. That's another thing that you must do when you have a renovation project or a CapEx project or value add project is control the communication chain. Because you'll have maybe one person that'll send out an email blast. They're mad at somebody for doing something wrong and they'll copy everybody on the email. Just throwing somebody under the bus. They did this, they did this, and it's copied everybody that's involved, but not the people that need to be involved. So now they've just taken up the brain space of everybody on the email chain. So everybody, even people that are not involved at that level, have to read that email, and then they make a phone call. Hey, what's going on with this? Is there something wrong? No. And it's a big waste of time. So you have to drill into your renovation team. This is who you talk to. If you have an issue with them, then you can come to me, but communicate with them. If they don't deal with the problem, come to me. Same thing with your management company. If you have an issue, come to me, or, communicate with the renovation company. But if you have an issue, come to me, and just control that. So it's not chaos and everybody emailing everybody and CCing everybody. And it's just a big waste of everybody's time. So make sure you control communication. And once you do that, you'll have a happy team. And a big do, or something that you must do, is you have to make sure that everybody understands they're on the same. And you wouldn't think you'd have to do that, but you do. You'll have arguments between the management and the renovation team. And again, it's, well, they didn't do this, or they didn't do this. And guys, we're on the same team. Just get it done, right? So what I would say to, let's say maintenance comes in and they say, well, they didn't rehook up the disposal. And so that's why we didn't lease it, because they didn't rehook it up. And, well, did you call them? Well, no, but it's not hooked up. And my answer to them is, well, you know how to hook up a disposal, correct? Yes. You get paid salary, correct? Yes. Well, then hook it up and don't even email me about it, and let's be done with it. Okay. So I have very little patience for stuff like that, but you have to remember that you have to create this environment of a team, and that you guys are not working against each other. You're working together. And no matter what, try to get everybody to just work as a team. Sometimes the renovation company is going to have to pick up the slack of the management company. Sometimes the management company is going to have to pick up the slack of the renovation company. But in the end, it's all for the benefit of the property, which is the benefit of everybody else. So that's a very, in-depth analysis of kind of some things I've run into. But let me keep on going down my list. I kind of got off on a trail there. Don't forget to type your questions in the Q&A box. We'll be getting to those in a few minutes. Don't let what you think is a great price keep you from getting a better one. We already kind of talked about that. Make sure you get 3 bids. Don't let your lack of knowledge about construction intimidate you. I will say, in many fields that I've been in construction and in insurance, especially when you start out, I remember, starting out in the insurance field and going to my first body shop when I was doing auto adjustments. And I don't know that much at that point in time about how to repair a vehicle bodywork, right? But I understood that if I allowed my lack of knowledge to be apparent, I may get taken advantage of by the body shop, And so it's not that you want to go out speaking, talking about things you don't know anything about, because they'll pick up on that real soon. What I always do is I ask questions in a way that makes it sound like I know what I'm talking about, but it makes them give me information that I really don't know. So that's the best way to get information. You can ask a question and frame it in a way that doesn't make you feel vulnerable to your lack of knowledge, but provides you the answer that you need. The other thing is, in this day and age with Google and YouTube, and you can get the answer to anything you need. And it's not rocket science. Construction is not rocket science. The only reason someone's better at something than you are is because they've been doing it longer. And that's the bottom line. It's not that they're smarter than you. It's just they've done it more, and they probably couldn't do what you're doing because they haven't done it before. So it's just a matter of experience, but it's not rocket science. It can be comprehended. But at the same time, lean on professionals that know what they're doing. You don't have to go get your, GC license just to start a renovation project, just so you understand everything. Be able to understand it. Don't be intimidated by it. And don't let that show, to other people. Be confident, and it'll help you in the long run. And again, if your manager or your contractor are talking about something you don't understand, ask them to provide photos. Some people are visual. I'm very visual. I can right now, if my contractor was to call me up and say, hey, at this property, underneath the balcony, we've got this situation going on, I can see it in my mind. And I can say, okay, I understand what you're talking about. So you'll have to cut a notch there. You'll have to put a post down, whatever the case may be. That's the way I work. And, you'll see me sometimes or my wife, my family will see me kind of like turning my head because I'm kind of like trying to get the right perspective of what I'm looking at in my mind. And they think I'm kind of crazy, but that's how I do things. But not everybody has that ability to visualize. I'll walk into a project and I'll say, oh yeah, I see you. We're going to remove this. We're going to do this. And I can see it all laid out in front of me, just like it was there. And you talk to the person next to you and they're like, yeah, I have no idea what you're talking about. So if you can't visualize it, that's fine. Maybe they've done this very specific thing on another property and say, well, do you have an example of what you're talking about where you've done that on another property? And maybe they can provide you some photos, or again, you can Google it and whatever they're talking about, you can maybe find some photos of what they're talking about and you can get an idea of what's going on. So there's some basic, a lot more don'ts than there are do's in this process. The don'ts are ones I've learned over the course of time. I always learn more from mistakes than I do from successes. Because sometimes you don't associate specific things to a success. You just don't. It's human nature. But when you fail, you know why. And so that sticks out in your brain. And so the biggest thing about failure is not learning from that failure. And that's the biggest failure, is not learning from failure, I guess is the best way to put it. So let's go through some of these questions. I've been rambling on for 40 minutes or so. Let's go through some. What are some ROI thresholds to use to evaluate the viability of each project? In terms of percentage wise, I can't really say that because it's specific to each property and what you need to achieve for your deal, whether it's JV or you have a syndication, whatever the case may be. You just have to make sure that you can achieve what you want to achieve in the market. That's the biggest thing, because you can put fake numbers out there all day. Oh, we'll put $5,000 into a property and, we're going to increase the rents by $150. That's just to give you a rough idea. And I think that's a pretty accurate based on the market. If you put $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 to try to get, between $150 to $175 in rent increases. But again, it depends on the property. You're going to have some properties that are lagging by $300, $400 in the market. Who knows why that is? That may be because it's managed and they don't answer maintenance requests. And so people don't want to live there and the Google reviews are bad. And it has nothing to do with the fact that it doesn't have stainless appliances or granite countertops. Okay. So don't always associate rent gaps with value add. I'm not saying it's not the case, but I'm saying it's not always the case. Sometimes you can achieve those without any actual dollars. You can achieve those by operational efficiencies. So, be sure you're checking on that. What do I look for when finding contractors and how do you vet them? If you're new to a market, the best way to do that is to talk to your property manager, especially if it's the manager you've worked with before, and get some recommendations from them. They will have worked with contractors in the area. There are different ways to go about this. You can either use a general contractor, and this is high level, but just for anybody that doesn't understand that, a general contractor is over the project and they have subcontractors under them. So they oversee the process and they have a flooring guy and they have a granite guy and they have a cabinet guy and they have an appliance guy and they manage everything and you just pay one person. In our particular case, I find that to be better because we're alleviating our management company of that extra burden. If we can do it for the same cost as our management company could do it for, then that's great. And sometimes that happens because, again, your management company their job is not to go out there and find the best price. So they may be able to manage the project as like the general contractor or the GC and just use the individual subs directly under them and they manage it, but they may not be getting the best price from those subcontractors. Whereas the general contractor with the same flooring guy over and over again. So he has a little bit more leverage over that subcontractor saying, hey, I got some more work for you down the line. You got to cut me a better break. Whereas the management company may not have that specifically. So you can either go with the GC or you can use direct subs. You can be the GC. You do not need a license for non-structural repairs. Most of the value add operations are cosmetic. It don't require a permit. Of course, that's dependent on your municipality. Sometimes windows require a permit, decks a lot of times require permits, different things like that, or balconies. But just check with your local municipality. But paint, granite, cabinets, light fixtures, plumbing fixtures, none of that requires. You're not adding any what we call branch circuits or any new feed lines for plumbing. So you can GC subcontractors if you feel comfortable doing that. And let's see. Okay, I had the same one. How do you find good, reliable contractor from out of state? Another great way to find good contractors is via Facebook or LinkedIn. A lot of these, multifamily investment groups have meet Monday or whatever. You want to tag yourself and say what you do. Keep an eye out for those. And you'll have some contractors say, we do renovations in the Southeast or in Texas or Florida or wherever. And you can try to vet some people that way. But I think the best way, if you're out of state and you're not close enough to the market, like semi-regional, then you're going to want to lean a little bit heavier on your management company. Some of the management companies provide the whole management system, and they'll charge you like a 5% fee or whatever your CapEx budget is. Say you have a $3 million CapEx budget, they'll charge you 5% of that, and they'll manage everything. And they'll have a person that is specifically involved with that. That's definitely much easier if it hits your budget and you can get some good references from them. That's a great way to go. We always look at the dollar amount and know that I can do it cheaper. So I kind of steer away from that most of the time. But again, it's just a matter of what you're looking for. Do you want to be more passive or do you want to be very, very involved? So it's just really up to you. Best way to acquire construction knowledge. The best way is to do it, but I know that a lot of people will not have that opportunity. From my high school years up, I've been involved in construction. My basic perspective has been always try to learn as much as you can about anything that you can learn it about, because you never know when you're going to need that knowledge. I remember specifically one time when I was a teenager, I didn't have a job. I was living on my own, had an apartment, didn't have a job. My roommate worked for an electrical company. And I just told him, I said, hey, I'm not doing anything. I don't have a job right now. I just lost it last week. They got laid off. I will come to work for you and for free. I mean, it's better than sitting at home, right? And I'm going to gain this knowledge. And so that's how I learned how to do electrical. And I ended up doing that for many years as a subcontractor. Within a year of starting for free at that company, I was a manager, a supervisor at that company. So I'm always looking for ways to learn, pick up knowledge. Other than that, there's the internet. That's a little bit more difficult. I don't really put much stock in higher education when it comes to construction, when it comes to actual hands-on construction. I think you can get some of that on the construction management side. That's good. But what I found is the college courses about how to frame houses or how to wire houses or how to plumb houses are really not accurate as to how it's really done. And they're very kind of puffy in their method. It's just not the way, these turnkey subcontractors do it. So I don't place a lot of stock in that. But if you have the opportunity, if you have a project that you're working on, come out and observe, watch, I think that's a great way to do that. So hope that answered that. All right, I'm gonna read through this question. Okay, does your company build and design multifamily, including 2 to 4 units, medical facilities, nursing home, apartment complexes too? We don't do any ground up development at this time. It's all, renovations on in-place properties. I am passionate about development. It's been a dream of mine since I was young. I just love taking a raw piece of land and building up. That's what I did in the residential field. I'd buy lots of custom homes and sell them spec. And but we don't do that in the multifamily space at this time. We definitely have looked into that, but don't do it at this time. How do you regulate or manage your construction inspections to meet regulations? So again, there are no inspections on cosmetic repairs. You will run into inspections as far as your lender is concerned. Especially if you're using a bridge loan, they're going to give you incremental draws based on what you have completed, and it's going to match up to the budget you submitted at the beginning. So in that case, you're keeping an eye on the progress weekly. When you have a big CapEx or value add project, you want to make sure you're on the phone with the managers and the renovation company weekly. We would have calls with all three of us on the phone each week for as long as it was necessary to work out all the kinks. So that'd be the contractor, the management company, and us as operators. Just to kind of get people used to just being candid and direct, and let's work out the kinks. If you got an issue with somebody or the way they did something, let's go ahead and discuss it now. You can kind of act as the moderator or the mediator for that and kind of get, any tempers, kind of settled down. If that's the case, you're going to have to keep an eye on that. And then we're always keeping a spreadsheet of renovated units. We have a whole construction, schedule, and these are something it's specific to the project, so there's no template I can give you or anything like that. But what we do is pretty much it's turned over on this day, by this date it's demoed, by this date the flooring's going in by this date, and it just keeps us on track. We have that on a Dropbox so it can be updated live. We give the manager, the construction company, and us access to it so I can pull it up at any time, and we keep pushing that it's always updated, keep it up to date as much as possible so we know where everything is in the order. And when it's completed, we have another tab that says completed units, and we just keep track of it that way. How has the current crisis of COVID impacted your business? So right now, the impact with COVID is with, having to push rents. And I talked about this early on about, don't be married to your plan. Things change and you're going to need to adjust, and you're going to have to be flexible. And so right now, you may not want to be pushing rents $200 a month. You may want to pause your value add program. Maybe you don't need to pause your value add program. The point is you need to be having these conversations with your management company. We were getting, collection reports daily from our managers. We did demographic reports to see where everybody's income was coming from. We were making sure we were in communication with our tenants to make sure that we weren't missing, anybody that had some needs that we could help out. And we made adjustments as necessary. We did not have to slow our value add program across any of our properties, but it may differ where you're at. Depends on if you're in a metro or secondary or tertiary market, if it's workforce or Class A, that's all going to have an effect on that. So hope that answered that question. Yep. And somebody pointed out to talk to local owners, especially on the smaller scale. If you're under 100 units, talk to some local owners, look it up, see who owns it, call them, say, hey, who did you use or whatever. They're going to have a reputation. Another thing that I'll do is I'll call the supply houses, like siding supply or lumber yard, say, who comes in the most and who's the busiest guy around and who do you think is the best? Who would you refer? I've picked up many contractors that way. Do you use any software to track renovations with the contractor? We do not use software. We use spreadsheets. We do use a software called Asana, however you want to pronounce it. The reason that we do that is because it's just a task. And I put my management company in there, and I put my renovation company in there, and I can assign them tasks. So when we have the phone call on Monday, I'm putting in tasks and I can give them due dates. So when we have the call the nenext week, I know what to follow up on. Hey, how do we look on this? And that way you're holding everybody accountable. So it's ASANA. It's a pretty, I think there's like a free version too. So it's very helpful on that. There's no real good baseline CapEx percentage rule. It really just depends on where you are in the market. Where do your rents sit? How long has it been since they've renovated the property? What needs to be done? You know, real quick, I want to point out the difference between unit renovations and amenity renovations. So unit renovations, I can quantify a rent increase, direct rent increase with the refrigerator or, you know, stainless appliances or backsplash. But redoing the clubhouse, I can't really say I'm going to get an increase in rent. However, my closure rate from my traffic may increase because I redid the clubhouse. So it's not always, it's not 100% just a straight, well, I'm not going to renovate the clubhouse because I can't see a dollar amount return for that. That's not always the case. Okay. So you have to also look at that aspect of it. The wow factor or the closure, you know, you want a very nice clubhouse. That's the first thing they're going to see. And so it makes an impression on whether they want to live there or not. So just keep that in mind. Hands-on approach. Where can we learn that? Any home improvement classes? Again, hands-on approach. The best way to learn hands-on approach is hands-on. You know, you can talk to other people that do it, get some insight from them. If you don't have any construction knowledge, I don't recommend jumping in on a multifamily project and trying to start from scratch on that. I think you're going to find it very uphill. There's a lot to learn there, and there are not all honest people in the space, and you know, you have to learn to listen to them and know the lingo. So there's a lot of deciphering I'm doing in my head when I'm listening to people talk, whether they know what they're talking about or not. So hands-on, best way, again, the word hands-on, I mean hands-on, that's the best way to learn. I mean, in my opinion. If you can't do that, then watch somebody that does and learn from them. Okay, we got a few minutes left. Yeah, the recording, somebody's asking if the recording will be available. It'll go out, it'll be emailed out later this afternoon or this evening. So you'll definitely be able to get a copy of that if you missed it. So sorry you weren't able to make the whole thing, but hopefully you'll get the first part of that. So we're not really, somebody's asking, how do you amortize the upgrade cost, i.e. 1 year, 2 years, et cetera, to figure out how much you may raise the rent? What we're looking for specifically is what can we put in to raise the rent, and is it worth that money? So you may be able to raise rent by doing a whole bunch of things, but you may have to spend $5,000 and only get a $50 rent increase. So is that worth it? You know, that's math you're going to have to figure out on your specific deal. But you definitely want to factor that in. I mean, I can tell you right now, if you're only getting a $50 rent bump on $5,000, it's not a good return. So, are you doing any business in any states with rent control? If yes, what is your experience with it? We are not, we will not. So stay away, in my opinion. We operate in the Southeast is another question. But they're national vendors. My flooring vendor is out of California. You know, like I said, I have people all over. We have cabinet companies. We've looked at overseas. The China market is in bad shape right now as far as imports. So we're really doing everything domestic. But we've worked with a cabinet company out of Virginia. I'm not going to share that information because that's proprietary, but, and I work very hard to come up with those. But, you know, what I do, how I found my vendors is I would just go and look at what most people were using for manufacturer in renovations, or what I see is very popular. And I would just call them directly, and I would just keep calling, be persistent until I got to talking to the person that I needed to talk to, and just tell them, hey, this is me. I'm going to have this many units. What are you going to do for me? And just be real direct, real blunt, and just get it taken care of. I had a cabinet contractor come in when I first started one project. He was charging me, X amount of dollars per cabinet install. It met my budget. Then I went and I did some research, and I went directly to the manufacturer that he was installing, and found out that, he was marking it up 3 times and charging me that. So again, that goes back to what I talked about earlier. Just because it meets your budget doesn't mean you're paying what you need to pay for it. So I did the research and was able to cut that cost by 2/3 by doing some research. So just put in the work and you'll get rewarded for it. Do you get a cost segregation study done for your rehab cost? Yes. We provide our rehab budget for our cost segregation company. So they kind of do 2 steps. They do it pre-rehab, and then you just kind of tell them what you did, and they do that not on site. So it's more of an on-paper segregation for that. Best unit renovation you have seen to increase NOI. It depends on the market. It depends on your competition. What do your renters expect? And that's going to be based on what your competition is putting in. So if nobody else has granite and somebody else is achieving higher rent, then don't put in granite. But if everybody has granite and they're achieving higher rents, then you need to put in granite. So there's no real hard, fast answer for that, but you need to look at your competition to figure that out. And one more question. What do you think about investing in multifamily units in Chicago and South Suburbs? I'm not going to speak to that because I'm not in that market. That's just not a market we're in. We like the Southeast because of the growth. We look for markets that are economically diverse. We look for different sectors of the economy to support that local economy, finance, manufacturing, whatever it may be. So that's kind of what we look for in our market. So I wouldn't be able to answer the Chicago one, but I'm sure there's some meetup groups there, multifamily investor meetup groups. Get with that group and find out who's doing it in the space and see how they're doing. That's the best way to do it. All right, so that's about all I can get into as far as questions. We're at our time limit. We're a little bit past. I'm sorry if I rambled there. Hopefully I provided some information. Again, Dan will be back next Thursday with the weekly webinars. This recording will go out this afternoon or this evening, and we'll be wrapping up here in just a few seconds. But thank you again for joining me. My forte is hands-on. My forte is not webinars or interviews. I leave that to Dan and even to Danny. I'm more behind the scenes, but I've enjoyed it. I hope you have, and we hope to catch you on the next one. So thanks again for joining us.